Hi guys. So right now I'm going to film a quick reading guide for F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Crack Up. I highly recommend that if you don't know anything about F. Scott Fitzgerald, that you take some time to maybe look up a short biography. Those of you who do know anything about him knows that he is a jazz era writer. He wrote The Great Gatsby. He was known for being one of our great American novelists. And this is one of his nonfiction pieces. It's about his life. It's about his struggle with not only alcoholism, but also what he didn't know then would be called depression. Okay, so I'm going to just give you guys some help deciphering this because I know the language is a little bit dense. So I'm going to start on page 520. You'll notice that in that first paragraph, he's making a claim, and that claim is about what sort of impacts make the most difference in a person's state of being. He says that there are the blows that come within and the blows that come without, right? So those exterior blows, or things like, somebody was mean to you, you had a bad day, that sort of thing. But he says that those aren't the things that really change who a person is. Really, it's the stuff that comes from inside, and you can't control those things, right? So he says the blows that come from within are the things that really make an impact on us. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. Your own mental health has a bigger impact on how you perceive the world and yourself rather than traffic, for example. So that's one of the first things to start with, because that's a big underlying idea that he uses to inform the rest of the piece. From there, he goes on to describe intelligence, and he describes intelligence as knowing... Wait, where is it? The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. So what that means is you should know the world sucks, but you need to try and change it anyway, right? So this idea you can't change the world, but you have to try. And he says that that's the key to being really intelligent, is knowing that things are kind of bad, right? And having this conflicting idea that you can't change the bad things, but you have to try it anyway. So you're going to see this idea throughout, this sort of understanding that he is not going to be able to be the same, but still striving to be the same, if that makes any sense. I am going to be posting this video as part of discussion board. Please ask questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. I'm just giving a quick reading guide for this. As he goes on, he describes how he wanted to be a lot of things. He wanted to be a soldier. He wanted to be a football star. He wanted to be lots of stuff, and none of it quite worked out. He had a life full of disappointment. But what you're going to notice in all of the things that he wanted to do, he wants to be famous in a way, right? He wants recognition. Think about the glory of a soldier on the battlefield, or, a football player. And he also mentions being a literary man, right? He wants a legacy. He wants a legacy of glory, right? As he moves through, right before we get to part 2 on page 521, or number 2 there, section 2, he says, up to 49, it'll be all right. I could count on that. For a man who's lived as I have, that's all you could ask for. The sort of ironic part of that is he's writing about how as long as he can make it to 49 years old, without completely breaking down, he'll be okay. He feels like that's a good marker. And I think that's very relatable. We set these arbitrary goals for ourselves sometimes. Of course, the irony of it all is he died before that. He died at 44. So he never did make it to 49. His alcoholism did get him in the end. So he cracks, right? And as he moves through, he starts talking about what happens when he cracks. So number 2 on page 521, what he's describing is his sort of fixations. If you turn on to page 522, he describes lists. He makes obsessive lists. He isolates himself. He doesn't engage with the world. He's struggling. And then all of a sudden, he's fine. Those of you who know somebody who struggles with depression, or possibly suffer from yourself, that's one of the things that kind of happens. You fixate on things, you isolate, and sometimes it just kind of, you snap out of it. A lot of times you don't. but it is something that happens. As he goes on, you'll notice on page 522, 523, you probably were a little bit freaked out by his descriptions of people that he likes and doesn't like. So he says on page 523, I couldn't stand the sights of Celts, English, politicians, strangers, Virginians, people of color, hunting people, retail clerks, and middlemen in general. All writers. I avoided all writers. He then goes on to say that what he does like is doctors, girl children up to the age of 13, boy children from about 8 years old on, and old people. So you were probably reading that and thinking like, oh my God, he's a racist pedophile. No. What he's really getting at here is these two groups of people, the people that he doesn't like to be around are people who expect something of him, right? Politicians, what do they want? A vote. During the 20s, what were people of color looking for? An opinion about race relations, right? And civil rights. Strangers might ask for a favor. Writers, right? You have to have a lot of, being a writer amongst writers, you have a lot of expectation for how you act. Meanwhile, children, what do they want? Not much. Old people. Are they going to judge you? Probably not, right? So it's one of those things where at this time in his life, he cannot be around anyone who has expectations for him. He cannot stand to be around people who might want something from him. Not a racist pedophile. But, I mean a little racist, to be honest, but that's not very specifically what's going on here. All right. Bottom of 523, you probably were also given pause by the conversation he has with the girl. Listen. The crack's not in you. It's in the Grand Canyon. Listen. Right. So he's having that conversation with her. And basically what she's saying is the conversation that we have a lot with people who don't understand mental illness is basically she's saying, well, stop being so sad, right? Just get over it. Why don't you just feel better? Why don't you just smile or drink more water? Those of you who are familiar with mental illness realize what a ridiculous sort of thing this is to say. And so what he's really doing here is he's saying no, you don't understand. I'm sick. There's something wrong with me. And she's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with the world. Don't worry about it. What always strikes me about this passage on page 523, this conversation with the woman, is, good God, we're still having that conversation, right? We're still telling people oh, if you just bootstrap it, if you just get over it. And now we know that that's not entirely true, but it's funny how little our conversation around mental illness has progressed in this sense. So of course, as he goes on page 524, he mentions vitality is something you can't take, right? So you might have the strongest grasp in reality. Your mental health might be perfect, but I could never borrow from you that sort of stability. It's yours. We can't share it. You can't inspire me to get over my mental illness. And that's one of the things he's talking about. And he describes it as vitality. But really it's mental health. Okay. So I hope you guys are sticking with me on this. I'm trying not to make this video super long, but I am hoping to highlight some of the larger themes here that I hope are going to be useful to you guys. So we're on section 3 now, which is handle with care. And he describes a lot of his disappointments in life. For example, he got sick, turned out to be tuberculosis, and he ended up having to drop back a class. But that wasn't that bad because he ended up joining a literary club that really made an impact on him. As he's moving through his sort of thoughts about these previous episodes of depression that he had, he starts to think about who he is, right? Who am I at my core? What are the pieces of myself that make me me? And so on page 527, we get the list. You'll see a list there of about 5 items. And in that list, he describes a different person that he's based his personality on. And he's come to the realization that maybe there's nothing truly organic about who he is, but rather he's sort of contrived himself based on these people. So he describes that his intellectual pursuits are are influenced by this man named Edmund Wilson. He goes on to describe a fur trapper that he has based his concept of the good life on. Number 3, his artistic conscience was given to him by somebody else, so the things he likes aesthetically. And then he has this 4th man who he uses as like the guidepost for how we react socially. And then, of course, politically, he's got another guy. So what he's realized is like these 5 people, he took pieces of them, put them together, and now he has himself, right? Which is kind of an interesting thought because depending on where you stand on the nature versus nurture argument, that might be all of us, right? Every once in a while, I'll make a joke or I'll say something and I'm like, that's my dad. Or I'll react in a certain way and I'm like, that's exactly how my mom would react. That's not me. That's my mom. Or I guess that's me because I did it too, right? If you really spend some time thinking about who you are and why you like or think the things you think, you might come to the same realization that F. Scott Fitzgerald did, which is, all of this I took from somewhere else. This didn't just like spring from me. Like I didn't choose my political party because of something that like just happened. I was influenced by these other people. An interesting exercise indeed. I do encourage you guys to spend some time thinking about that. So that's the list. And he comes to this realization, like there was no I, right? He had no sense of true organic self. So as he moves forward, he realizes that he's cracked, right? He's broken, and he's trying to put it all back together. And that's where we end up with in pasting it together. So as he describes, he moves through this and he's realized he has no real sense of self. He's broken and he doesn't think he's getting back to where he was. And he's got to figure out how to move forward with what he's got now. So what he's doing in that section 4 is he's really sort of thinking, I was never really a person. I'm less of a person now because of how I'm feeling. So how do I live? I have to live, right? And so what he comes up with is he wants to be kind of a fake person. He wants to be like a mannequin. On page 530, he describes a smile. He says, and a smile. I would get me a smile. So he's planning on getting a smile, and this type of smile that he's describing is fake. It's just like, right? And it's not like a real, genuine smile. And he's going to put that smile on in order to exist in a world in where he doesn't really feel comfortable anymore. And then he goes on in the next paragraph to describe a voice. And you guys are very familiar with this voice and you don't know it. This fake voice he's describing, it's your customer service voice. I'm sure a lot of you have one. The customer service one. Hi there, welcome to blah, blah, blah. My name is Corbin and I'm happy to help you today. Like, oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me help you with that, right? Like, even in this moment, like my voice changed because that's my customer service voice left over from when I used to be a secretary. And you all have one, right? That fake voice. But what he's saying is that fake customer service smile, that fake customer service voice, that's who he's going to be all the time. Can you imagine if you never shut that off? He is resolving that that is what he's going to do. It's sad. It's very sad. As he moves through, he talks about how he doesn't really want to engage in the world anymore. And he's ultimately deciding that what he's going to be is this fake person. He doesn't want to help anybody anymore unless there's something in it for him. He's not going to engage in anything anymore. Ultimately, he's just going to kind of go through the motions. So ultimately we have here with F. Scott Fitzgerald, the piece as a whole, is he's working through his mental illness and he comes to this conclusion that there really is no hope for him. And then, of course, the sad thing about it all is before this piece was published, he died. Didn't kill himself. It was a heart attack. But he died. And so he never really got to exercise this fake person that he was contriving of, but it's kind of a sad thing. When you're reading this, I do want you guys to think about how you relate to it and what seems relevant to your life or society nowadays. I find this piece to be incredibly creepy in that it still reflects a lot of the ways that we think about mental health and the ways that we don't know how to help people who are suffering from things like depression. All right, guys. I hope that helped. I'm going to post this. If you guys have any further questions, ask them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. Please don't. Also, don't comment on my YouTube thing because I don't look at that. Comment in the discussion board in Canvas. Okay? All right. Good luck. It's going to be great, guys. Bye.